Namaste, everybody. I'm Lizzie Brooks, and this is where muscle meets mindful. So I welcome you today for the topic of uncovering arm balances. We're going to cover 3 main arm balances today, but the principles and the tips and tricks that I teach you today will be very helpful in most, if not all, of the arm balances that you're going to do or attempt. So I'd like to start with just some things about technique. So a lot of students come to me and they want help with arm balances, and what they say is, well, you know, I want to do this arm balance, but I don't have enough core strength, or I don't have enough upper body strength. Do you need core strength and upper body strength for arm balances? Absolutely, you definitely do. But you might need a little less of both in order to actually produce the shape of some of these arm balances. And that's twofold. One is we can make these shapes using props and get our muscle memory going and build strength for an eventual float. And 2 is that there's physics involved, there's weight distribution techniques involved, there's what you're wearing. Yes, it plays a part. It's not how cool you look in your yoga clothes. So there are a lot of things that you can actually grow in your practice with just by knowing. So I'm here to demystify some things. Come along with me and let's learn. So one thing, I brought up clothing earlier. And no, it doesn't mean you have to have a brand name yoga outfit in order to lift off and fly in your arm balances. Quite the contrary. It means that what is touching fabric to fabric, skin to skin, or skin to fabric plays a role in your ability to hold the posture together. So I'm going to show you that through crow and crane today, and I want you to keep in mind that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person, okay? So I'm going to talk about that. The other thing is it's not just strength that's needed for these postures, but oftentimes people have a lot of strength and they're lacking in flexibility, and they need the actual flexibility to create the posture before it even lifts. So there's a flexibility aspect to it. I know tons of, people who are totally, muscle bound and all that kind of stuff, but they can't maybe get their knee high enough on their arm to stay without maybe slipping off, or maybe they can only go to the elbow and they fall. So the other thing that I want to cover too is drawing in and up versus hanging out in space. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then practice, practice, practice. There are 2 types of fear that I find most often with these arm balances. And that is, number 1, just the natural fear that you're gonna fall and hit your face on the ground. Like, why would you be scared? You're only just balancing on something you've never balanced on. Of course there's fear. Absolutely. And so it's only through doing it over and over and over that that's lessened, and through using these techniques that I'll teach you, which will allow you to gain confidence. So there's that type of fear. And the other one is, I think we talk about this less, but it's fear of failing in an arm balance. So especially if you are in a class with multiple people and the teacher's like, and for those of you who can float up into crow, just do that. And you're looking around like, who, me? I'm not going to attempt this here. And so you don't feel like it's a safe space to try that because you might be judged or something like that. First of all, you won't be judged, and if you are judged, well, those people can, they're on my S list. But second of all, here at home on your own, really feel free to try so many things and have the courage to just test it out. No one is there, no one is looking at you, and really people are more up in their own thing than they are in your thing. If you're over there and you've fallen down 30 times, they're more worried about their own practice and themselves. So just rest assured that people are thinking about your flailing around much less than you might think. So let's talk about some of those things and let's address them within the postures. So some of you might have already watched one of my flows where I talked a little bit about crow and crane pose. So basically, there's not a ton of difference. Usually the way that people see them as different is that crow is more bent elbow and crane is more straight elbow, so straighter. My preference is crane. I actually think it's easier. So for me, let me show you what I mean. If I were to hold this posture with bent elbows for a long time, chaturanga, or even just a little bent plank, this would be harder for me than here, right? So stacking my shoulders over my wrists, over my elbows, or even just having a straight arm, even if they're not stacked. So feel free to play around with bent elbows or straight arms and see which one you like better. And they both have plenty of benefits. So when talking about flexibility, if I am not open in my hip, I can't probably get my knee, so I have to actually lift my hip up. I have to take some external rotation in order to get my knee higher up on my arm, okay? So there are lots of places of flexibility. I'm not going to go very deep into this that impact these postures, but that's just one of them, okay? Sometimes it's not that you don't have the flexibility, it's just that you don't quite have the lift and you can't lift that knee onto that position as well, or just kind of get it in there like a puzzle piece. So that's where a block is really useful, or anything where you can build up the floor a little bit that's pretty stable. So from here, placing your block and stepping onto the block with the ball joints of the feet allows you to get a little higher up. So the hands are down here, the feet are higher up, which lifts the pelvis and the knee higher. So you might be able to get the knee in a little closer to the upper arm. Now, am I in my armpit with my knee? No. Am I right here on the tricep where it's more tender? No. I'm kind of back in this nook, a little bit up here, okay? So I'm not jutting deep into the muscle, but closer into that area that isn't as tender behind that insertion point. And there are a million ways to do all of these postures. This is one of them that I find a little bit easier. The second thing about where I'm connecting my knee to my upper arm is that I am not straight lines, shins and arms. I am making an X shape. So if you see the relationship between my upper shin and knee area to my upper arm, I'm making an X. So if you were to balance something, and I'll show you from here, if you had this and you wanted to balance something on top of it, it would be pretty hard to just balance another straight line on top of it. If you had a little X, it would be easier to balance. That's the same thing that comes into play in this particular posture. So we've got a couple things working now. We've got the block, which takes the feet up higher, which in turn takes the hips and pelvis up higher, and the knee can go higher on the arm. And what that does is it allows you to not only land here to start. So prep is everything. If you just try to throw yourself into these arm balances, you're likely to slip out. So spend more time in the preparation and the setup, okay? So for instance, if I don't have the hip flexibility or I just don't know about it, and I try to put my knees high up, but I'm only getting to my elbows, I might try to lift and slide down instead. So if I'm starting really close to the elbow, that makes sliding out of it probably more of a factor than if I start up nice and high, okay? Now I'm gonna talk to you, and we're gonna put this all together, but I'm kind of inching you in. we're gonna talk about what you're wearing, okay? You look great, don't change a thing, unless it's affecting your arm balances and you wanna do an arm balance. So if you are fabric on fabric, I find that to be the toughest way to do an arm balance. Unless your fabrics have a lot of grip and they are easy to hold on to, okay? For most yoga clothes, they have Lycra and spandex and all that kind of stuff in it, and you're gonna be slipping fabric on fabric. What I mean is if I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt and I'm wearing these yoga pants and I try to do an arm balance, I am sliding, okay? So there's two ways that people generally like to dress to not slip. One is skin to skin. So that would be more like if I moved my pants out of the way and I came into skin to skin here, or fabric to skin here. And it depends on a lot of factors. If you are sweaty, skin to skin is going to be very difficult. If you have lotion on, skin to skin is going to be very difficult. And we've all been there, okay? And hopefully we didn't go back. I find that more than not, skin to fabric gives that nice connection and a little bit of a grip without the slide. And again, pay attention to the fabrics that you're wearing because they can impact whether or not you stay up or fall out of an arm balance. All right, so let's put these things together. Having said all that, if we have our block and we have our fabric to skin, okay, because that's my preferred way to do it, and we come up here onto our block to gain access higher up on the arm with not a straight line, but a crossed X shape. Okay, we've got that. Now let's talk about hands. Hands are not shoulder distance apart. Shoulder distance apart is going to be harder for you to balance on than a little bit wider, okay? So let's go a little bit wider. Fingertips can slightly turn out to the sides if you like. Now from here, a lot of people get stuck. They come up high, so you want to take your time setting it up, but they keep the hips down. So what I'm going to recommend is coming onto the ball joints of the feet and lifting the hips higher and keeping the ball joints of the feet towards one another. And then from here, scooting the hands just a little closer in, finding that X shape and hugging that in, using even the inner thighs to hug towards the midline. Then I brought up physics and weight distribution techniques earlier, and you're gonna see that firsthand. So if this is my posture, and it was all just core and upper body strength, then I would try to lift my feet, and I would keep falling backwards, okay? My weight is gonna keep falling back, and I'm not gonna feel like I'm getting that flight. If I can shift my weight forward, shoulders actually going past the wrists, I'm going to balance my weight. My head is heavy, my pelvis is heavy. This is going to help us to find a more of a lag time and a hold in relationship with gravity. So watch closely as I not just use my upper body and core, but I actually use my shift of weight forward to lift. Hands down, wider than shoulders, heels high, hips high, finding my high connection, hugging in. Now I'm gonna do this, and I want you can even see it in the feet. I'm gonna move forward, 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 forward. Oh, I moved forward enough that the feet came up. And now I'm gonna use that extra technique where I hug into the midline. Hugging in, and up, the gaze is forward and down, and then coming back. Woo, rolling out the wrist. So within this is something I brought up at the beginning of the video, which is hugging towards the midline. I cannot tell you how often, and I'll show you without the block. I cannot tell you how often I see crow and crane done in this way, where folks feel like they're in it, they get a little bit of lag time, but they don't feel like they have a lot of lift or enough strength, okay? And that's because the energy of the posture is just kind of everywhere. It's kind of hanging out everywhere. And again, this doesn't mean that it's wrong. Any arm balance, however you need to do it, make it your own. However you enjoy it, make it your own, as long as it's safe. But for me, if you draw in and up, you have more height away from the floor, and I feel more integrated and strong. So what I mean by that is, if you've ever seen it done with the feet wide, okay, and the feet are just hanging at the sides. So this is technically crow pose. Okay, elbows are bent, feet are up. I straighten my arms. It's kind of technically crane pose here, okay? But the feet are hanging off to the sides. Again, that's totally fine. You can do it that way every single time. But the little trick of taking the toes together, knees wide and lifting, drawing into the midline, and then taking that energy up, helps me feel like I have more hang time and I'm not struggling as much, okay? So I'm gonna integrate that without the block now. I'm gonna take my feet starting closer together. They don't have to be touching to begin. Hands down wider than shoulder distance apart. Hips up. I'm gonna take that time to puzzle piece as high up to the upper arm, make that X shape as much as I can. Hug the low belly in and up. And then allow a weight change, which is moving forward, 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 then up. Look, now my toes touch. Can I then take my heels towards my sitting bones and point my toes back as I maybe straighten my arms for crane? Breathing here. And look how far my shoulders are forward of my wrists. The shoulders forward of the wrists help you lift what's behind you. You're counterbalancing that weight by shifting forward. And then coming back to the fear issue, our trusty blanket. So again, the first type of fear that I talked about was fear of falling. That's what this is for. Fear of failure, the blanket might not help as much for just feeling less confident about like what the pose looks like. But for the straight up fear of falling, if I know that if I fall forward, I'm gonna land on some padding, right? I'm gonna feel a little better than if I have just a hard surface or just my mat in front of my face. So setting this up can actually psychologically make you feel better about doing your arm balance. So if you are going to use your blanket, any blanket will do. You could even use a fluffy towel or a couple of those. Never put your hands on the blanket to do that. So that's like putting your hand on a more wobbly surface, right? There's more give here than say here. So your hands would go underneath the blanket, all right? And what that would look like is lift, set up, really take your time, hug in, even let the inner thighs work, draw into the midline, move your weight forward, then draw in, and then maybe draw in and up. Whether or not your arms are bent or straight is sort of up to your preference. Looking down, breathing here. Okay, I did once have someone push me over in an arm balance where my arms were totally bound in behind my knees, and it was on a tile floor. So I was using my blanket for a while after that. Things stick with us. All right, so let's roll our wrists out. If you were trying any of that, let's let that go. And then I want to take our hands in the opposite direction for a stretch. So fingertips turning towards the knees, spread the fingers gently wide, and then stay here and breathe, or if you need more stretch, you can sit back any amount. My son can decrease this angle to such an acute angle, I can't even look at it. It's pretty crazy. He's like, I thought everyone can do that. No. All right, and let's shake those out. So within that posture, we saw the setup is really, really important. What you're wearing is important as far as grip goes and not sliding. Weight distribution, physics of the posture is totally important, and addressing fear is also really important. So keeping those things in mind, one more thing on crow and crane. You can use a wall, and I'm gonna do another video on arm balances that will cover different arm balances than today, but you can always use a wall or a block, especially if you're really afraid about coming forward or you've never even made the shape before. So I'll show you with the blocks here. You place your head down, okay? So it's on the blocks. You're roughly kind of at your hairline. Set up the posture, place your head down, and then draw up from there. So now you're working less hard and you know you're not gonna fall forward. Do not ever use the block like this with your forehead here. This is way too precarious. So make sure it's a nice base. And in the same way that I used these blocks, you can use a wall and come into it with your head against the wall. That just takes a little measuring out body to where it needs to be in relationship to the wall. So please keep those things in mind and use props. I mean, it just trains the body and the brain to learn how to build the posture over time. So the next one that I want to talk about is astavakrasana. And I would like you guys, if you're attempting these, to have already been stretched out and open and all that, and not just coming to these cold. I wouldn't just show up for a class and be like, hey guys, arm balances. You do an arm balance, you get an arm balance, right? So warm up first, okay? I have warmed up a little bit, so that's why I'm even attempting this one, especially because the next two, astavakrasana and koundinyasana 2, take a good amount of hamstring length, unless you're doing a modified version. So astavakrasana takes a lot of open hips. So this would mean working your baddha konasanas, working into your hip joints, your hamstrings, all of that kind of stuff. So let's pretend we did all of that. With astavakrasana, there's one main thing I see over and over and over, and that is an inability to get the legs straight. Now, that inability to get the legs straight could be, as I mentioned, a hamstring issue. Totally fine, absolutely. Or various tissues that aren't kind of open. But sometimes it's just a structural issue as far as where you're in your own way. So I'm going to address that here. Lots of times, so astavakrasana starts, this is already like, what? I say, when yoga teachers are like, now just easily put your leg over your shoulder, like it's a backpack strap. This is not easy. This has taken me years and years and years. Okay, so bear that in mind. So you take yourself into this leg over the torso. Now notice that in yoga, a lot of times we say, sit up nice and tall. I'm not sitting up nice and tall in order to make this connection happen. I'm actually hunkering down. I'm rounding to get my shoulder lower and internally rotated to get that leg up. I might extend the lower leg, I might not, okay? So from here, hunkering down and bringing the leg up. You are not just holding the leg there with your hand, but you're eventually gonna hug it in with your musculature, drawing that energy in, okay? So you can start with the leg forward or up. There is an arm balance here, okay? And that can be phase 1 of astavakrasana. But I more so wanna talk about going to the side. So for that reason, I'm gonna put my lower knee bent. Hunker down, draw it up. Use muscular energy, holding it in, draw the leg towards your midline. Then where you place your hands, you might have to move your leg a little bit. I'm coming very close to the sitting bone of my leg that's over my shoulder with my hand, my elbow is bent. Hugging in, other hand goes down to the side. And then just like in crow pose and crane, there is a shift of weight forward. There is a lean forward to help push up. So instead of just trying to lift here, right? That's a little harder. I'm actually going to hug in, hands down, lean my weight forward and see what lifts. My lower ankle is going to engage just like my upper one is. I'm going to connect them and reach them to the side. So this is what I see a lot. I see people about this high, legs kind of bent, little to the sides like this, and they're kind of struggling. And they say, okay, that was it. Ooh, that pose is awkward. That is it. So, is that astavakrasana? Absolutely. Is that how you want to do it? If it is, great. If you want to take it a little more into chaturanga positioning arms, and instead of going to the side, kick your legs more forward, you might have more length of the legs in a straight line. Sometimes when you kick to the side, your arm's in the way. There's no way those legs are going to straighten. So I'll try to show you that again. Coming quickly in, I'm going to the side. My top leg is I have a big space. But if I kick my legs forward and I drop my shoulders more into a chaturanga arms and my feet come forward in my periphery, then I kind of decrease the amount of space between my knees and my legs can elongate forward. And as I mentioned, I'm not as high up, I'm more in that chaturanga arm. I also have a tendency to drop one shoulder a little bit, the shoulder that's away from the extended legs. So sometimes I get in that posture, I'm really low, I'm a little like this, and I have to just pull that shoulder back a little bit. Okay, so let's roll the wrists around a little bit. That one was a little less confusing than crow and crane can be. But the hamstring length is something, again, you want to work on completely independent before you start doing that. And do you have to straighten the legs all the way? No, you don't. So koundinyasana, or koundinyasana, however you say it, too, is one that has multiple ways to get into. And people have their favorite way to get into it. And I'll talk about that, but I also want to talk about getting out of it. This is an extremely extended asymmetrical posture that if you try to pull back out of with like a full extended leg or something like that, you can really hurt your back or your hip or various other parts of the spine. So how you get into it is just as important as how you get out of it, right? So let's think about those things. And you might play with multiple ways to get in and out. So I see a lot of times this posture done from more of a kind of warrior two legs, side angle legs. So a lot of times I see it, people come into your lunge, they drop their chest down, they take their shoulder underneath a leg, and they work the posture from here. I find it very hard to get this front foot lifted and up from this position, okay? So if you like that entry point, it's totally fine, okay? Also, for people who are not going to be able to straighten the front leg due to lack of flexibility in their hamstrings and hips, that entryway doesn't work for them because they actually need to be here and have their leg like this position instead of here. So it's two different positions. All right, so we'll do a little prep work, which will prep us for both entry points. Downward facing dog, straightening, alternating the legs into a bend and a stretch, softening the neck, finding the breath. And then from here, we're just going to draw in with a bent knee, externally rotated, one hip, doesn't matter which one you're doing, to the elbow and back. Shoulders come forward, touch, inner knee, and back. Okay, so once you have that, you're gonna feel, okay, that takes strength, that takes work through the obliques and the hip and the core, but there's a kickstand that this posture uses. Okay, so one arm is more to the side and one arm is more here. One arm is touching your side body and the other is coming out at an angle to catch that inner leg of the leg that's coming forward. Now, there's a little trick. Some people put that arm that's near them a little more under them, like a little structural support, okay? So you can feel free to use that as long as it doesn't bother your elbow, your neck, your shoulder, anything like that. So now we're gonna work those taps with a kickstand elbow coming out. Downward dog. You're coming forward and you're kickstanding the arm out and tapping and coming back. Coming back is pretty tough. It's a lot of work, so really stabilize through the whole trunk. Coming forward, tap, and back. One more time. One arm goes under and to the side, the other out to hold the leg, and back. And then let's roll that out. Great. Now I'll show you the 2 entry points. I won't go in. All right, let's see what happens. I'm not gonna lie, who knows what I'll do. I'm crazy. All right, I will move this wire out of the way so I don't break my mic in the process. Okay, so from here, some people, as I said, step forward. They hunker down with their chest. They take their arm out to the side. Hands are basically a little bit behind the shoulders. They straighten their leg, and then they lean forward here. And they come up, and they come back. All right. I really hate that way of entering into that posture. I feel like it's very hard to lift that front foot, and I just feel like it's more demanding to just do, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this. It's very much 1, 2, 3. I like it to be a little more fluid to help you lift. So what I mean by that is I like to have this in play, knee comes in, and then the lift follows. Okay, so, and I would never want you to do it that fast, but I'm just showing you the fluidity of it versus boom, boom, kick up, right? So, kickstand arm is my right arm on this one. I'm going to hug in, find that, and then maybe I'm just here with my knee bent. Okay. A note on that, the physics and the weight distribution on this is, if my weight is too far back and if my shoulders are too far up, so say this is my body, my shoulders are here and my feet are here. If I'm like this, I'm gonna be kicking my feet up, and I'm gonna keep landing back, and I'm not going to float, okay? If I allow my front body to drop down a little bit and I keep the rest of my body straight and strong, I might be able to lift that back portion. Again, weight distribution, physics. I'm going to very much exaggerate this so you can see what I mean with that tip. And I don't want you to necessarily do this. It like looks really cool, like, oh, you can put your legs so far up in the air, but it might not be okay on your shoulders, okay? So I'm gonna show you that here. So I could just be here kicking that foot up, or I can drop my shoulders down and tilt, all right, to come up. So I'm really dropping my shoulders. Again, you don't need to drop your shoulders that much. You can still be in this posture, and I'll show you from the other side. You can still be in this posture in more of a straight line. So my arms are more chaturanga here, and if I want, I can go up and down. Ooh, this is tough on the wrist. There's a lot of arm balancing today. Yes, it takes core strength. Yes, you want to engage through the quads, through the inner thighs, through the core, all the way down through the toes in order to stay in that straight line, okay? But no, you don't always have to dip, but staying up in the shoulders, if I'm up here, it's gonna be really hard for me to lift anything, right? Then if I just do a transition of my weight more forward and then up. So that transition of the weight forward is not as extreme as it is in crane, I don't think, but there is definitely a transition of weight forward. So I'm going to show you that again, and I want you to watch closely and notice what happens in my toes when I transition a little more forward. Here, transition forward. Here, toes, toes, and lift. All right, so it's maybe an inch, inch and a half, something like that, but there is a weight distribution technique. There is a change in where I'm positioning myself so that the weight in front of me helps balance the weight behind me and I level out a little bit more. So coming out of the pose is something I want to talk to you specifically in this pose. So as I said, you're in a way asymmetrical posture. One leg might be straight, other leg is back. You don't want to compromise that lumbar spine and collapse there. I think the hardest way to transition is to take that leg that's in front straight and bring it all the way back straight and then down, okay? That is a ton of strength. Another way that is difficult, but maybe not as difficult, is your leg is straight, then you bend it, then you bring it back and down. Also difficult, okay? Another way you can do it is to lower the back knee and bring it back. And another way you can do it is to just melt onto the floor, okay? Very safe. Okay, so I'll go over those. This is the toughest one. Ooh, I'm gonna feel that for days. All right, second hardest. Even I buckled a little bit there. I'm pretty tired after talking about arm balances so much. All right, that was the second hardest. Now from here, I'm gonna lower my back leg's knee down so that I can transition a little bit easier. I'm here, I'm gonna put my toes down, my knee down, bend in, shift back child's. That was me bending not only the front knee, but the back knee. And then my favorite of all ways to get out of this posture is a downward facing shavasana. Koundinyasana 2, and oop, I lost my strength, and good night. So that is, if you get into the posture, you're there, and then you go, oh no, like there's no way I can get out of this with enough strength. I don't have any more strength. Then you just slide, slide, slide down to the floor, and you take a little nap, and your friend covers you with a yoga blanket, and you suck your thumb. No, you just come down and rest. So if you don't do the resting that complements all of this really hard arm balancing work, you're doing yourself a major disservice. You're going to burn out. Your joints are gonna bother you. You're going to feel much more fatigued. You're probably gonna feel overheated or even emotionally heated. It's such hard, challenging work. To not complement that with some sweetness and some rest, I feel like you're missing the point of yoga. So those are just some of my tips and techniques for this version of arm balances and uncovering them. Please, I would love to know what content you want me to go over, what arm balances you want me to demystify, and let me know in the comments also, did these techniques work for you? Do you need more clarification? I'm happy to answer those things for you. And as always, you know, press a little like, press a little subscribe. I would really appreciate that. I feel so weird asking for that, but it means a lot to me. And this has been Muscle Meets Mindful. There was a lot of muscle in this one. I hope you enjoyed, and have a beautiful day, yogis. Namaste.